on mute.
Thanks, Jeff. I recognize the voice. Good morning, everybody. This is Philip Bain. I'm the Managing Director of Smart Cities Council. Today is one of many working sessions we have with Nashville on the impact of urban flooding and how to mitigate it for vulnerable populations. So just for those of you that are new to what we're doing, essentially, this is part of our ongoing quarterly challenge, which we have every calendar quarter. We identify projects that we can help a city accelerate, and in the process of accelerating the project, we can also help other cities. So right now, for the first quarter of 2021, we have 10 different cities that have given us about 40 projects. And if you go to our website, you can see them. You can see the projects. You can vote on which cities projects would be interesting to you. So just as an example, you see Nashville is one of them. And so for instance, if you were really interested in urban flooding and us continuing to work on urban flooding through the first quarter of next year, you would vote for Nashville. So it's not just a question of saying that, hey, this is a cool project. It's also saying that this is a project that would help you. So our overall goal with, this is, I think, about let me see, I can tell you right now. Our overall goal with these sessions is to deliver a roadmap to Nashville on equitable approaches to urban flooding. We use Smart Cities Activator, which is an online collaborative planning tool. As most of you know, 80% of all projects fail in the planning stage, and our goal is to change that number radically by working with cities in terms of both improving stakeholder engagement and also accelerating access to solutions. And specifically today, we're talking about sensor solutions. So up to this point, we've had 4 sessions. This is the 5th session. And throughout the sessions, what we've been doing is Nashville's been telling its story, talking about the impact of flooding, specifically the May 2010 flood. We've talked about policy objectives. Nashville has an approach called equity in design. And if you go back to the Activator roadmap, you can see right there underneath the graphic that there's a Nashville equity and design approach, which is a unique approach for them. About how can they have more equitable outcomes. And every city that wants a copy of the Nashville roadmap will be able to see equity in design and possibly consider it. Today is very much a sort of down-to-earth working session because we're going to talk about sensors. With the help of Jeff Booth from Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate, we've really been able to put together a cool group of sensor providers here. We have Hi-Fi, Greenstream, and IntelliSense today, and they're going to talk about their sensors. Then we're going to have some help from Josh McSwain from the county of Mecklenburg, North Carolina, which includes Charlotte. And he worked with Jeff on a 3-year pilot, and we're going to go through use cases. So it's going to get really down and dirty. We're going to talk about how these sensors can be used. Josh is going to talk about how they used them in Mecklenburg. And then we have a panel of experts and leaders from Nashville, including Dr. Janie Camp from Vanderbilt, Jennifer Higgs, who's a data scientist, Roger Lindsay, who's a data scientist, and Tom Palco, who works in the water division. And we're going to ask specific questions about how these use cases could be used for Nashville. And then for those of you that are interested, we're going to have a data modeling session next week where we're going to talk about how you take the data and start integrating it into multiple applications. In January, we're going to do a deep dive into data and analytics about communities, economic, social, community infrastructure. And then the month of February, we're going to be finalizing the Activator plan so that Nashville can start using it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Wong, our first panelist. Brandon, I'm going to make you the presenter. And as we're going through here, for the audience, especially when we get into use cases, but also when we're talking about different solutions, please feel free to ask questions. We'll collate the questions towards the end, but certainly, don't hesitate to ask questions. There's a specific, and all of the handouts that you'll see today are in our handout, so you can download them. It's all yours, Brandon. Introduce yourself, your company, and then your solution. Thank you.
Great.
Philip, are you able to see my screen okay?
It's a gray screen.
It should be
right
gray
now.
box. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
Wanted to make sure you knew the color. Okay.
It's one of those checks, like that rock bands put on their writers.
Now I can see hi-fi. Thank you. I'm going to mute myself and go ahead.
Okay, cool. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Wong, and I am the president and CEO of Hi-Fi. And so at Hi-Fi, we focus on providing end-to-end services reporting water levels. And ultimately, we focus on helping reduce the time that you may spend out in the field and maximize the amount of time that you can focus on more pressing issues such as flood response or, let's say, like asset management or even like recreational and safety, recreation and safety. So I wanted to take my time here today just to share with you just what goes into, those services that we provide and maybe like what a potential partnership with us looks like. So with Hi-Fi, it starts with water levels, and we focus very intently on reporting them accurately and precisely, and to the point where you can imagine just like a ping pong ball floating at any location that you have in mind, and you would know the precise location of where that ball is floating. And how that process gets started is we start with talking with the communities, and we identify with them what are some of the most pressing places where they would like to know what the water levels are like. And once those are identified, we go out and Hi-Fi secures the permits. And once that is all ready to go, we have a crew of really experienced technicians. They go out and they survey the water levels at those identified sites. And once they have that water level surveyed, they leave a reporting device there to continuously track that water level over time. And so that's what allows us to continue to monitor these water levels at so many different places throughout, say, a given region or watershed or even county. So to give you a sense of where we're at the moment, we're a new company, but just this fall, we've installed over 50 sensors, and those are now online in Cleveland. And if you had the chance to tune in last week, you might have met Mike, and he's one of the great partners we're working with. And you'll see some of the pictures on the left are, so closer up of the crew as they're out in the field, and then a map in the middle of where these 50 monitoring devices are located. And then on the right-hand side, a few pictures of, what they look like in the field. And to add to that, we have other large deployments that have also gone in Michigan and upstate New York as well. And so overall, just this fall, given, I know it's been a whirlwind of a year, but we've been able to get nearly 100 devices out there, and they're streaming and reporting, all collecting this water level data. And so to zoom in and give you a sense of what that coverage looks like. Now, I wasn't able to fit all 50 on there, but I hope this kind of gives you a glimpse of what it's like to see, multiple sensors placed in, a given region, and seeing how, after a given storm event, how the levels fluctuate and change over time and over space as well, and start to begin to see what those relationships are like between upstream and downstream monitoring locations or neighboring subcatchments and so on. And so that is all underpinned by us and having focused really intently on these technologies. Our background involves just a lot of monitoring and doing water level monitors in particular and collecting that data. And so we really use that experience to build the best possible device that we could think of to ensure that these devices are collecting data reliably, that they stay connected, and that they even operate during extreme conditions such as winter and even in Michigan in those freezing temperatures. So we focus on reliability, and that even has come into play when looking at nearby federal gauges. And so what we're looking at here is a span of about a couple months or so where we see I've plotted a Hi-Fi gauge and a USGS gauge there, and seeing how over time just how we're able just to continue to provide that water level data, and just in case there's outages and other reporting agencies like the USGS. And to add on to that, we know like technology is evolving, and we would always love to have the newest and greatest technology in our devices. So part of this design is to really make the sensor in two pieces and make it swappable. So there's a mounting unit here, and whenever we install a sensor, it's really easy. You take the unit, unbox it, and place it in, and there's a couple security screws that you screw down, and that's the installation complete. And when we want to upgrade a device, for example, then that's just a matter of unscrewing these, removing the old device and placing in the new one. So that's just a quick way for us to continue to make sure that all the latest technologies are in there, and keep the data consistent and streaming. So overall, what that adds up to is us really being able to provide a site level awareness. So, you can see these sensors are compact and pretty portable and self-contained. We like to think, they're actually like truly wireless, and because all the wires are contained within that unit. So whether, it's a stream or a river or even like a parking lot, like these sensors are pretty adaptable to those conditions, and they're reporting consistently. So within minutes, if there is a flood condition, for example, you'll know that. And so what I've shown is, this is an example map of Nashville, and what that may look like if we're reporting a flood on a parking lot, and that experience of getting that alert in the palm of your hand, not having to worry about like driving out on site and seeing what the conditions look like, but having a preliminary alert just to raise your awareness of the situation. And that's what we're striving towards, is really just this whole idea of knowing that there's a lot of assets out there to manage, and it's important to a lot of community members throughout, that we've been working with, to be able to access this data and use it in their own ways. So our focus is, to collaborate with these communities and really deliver a positive experience and maximize their engagement, whether that's through, text or email. Maybe it's like an Instagram post of someone going out and paddling, or just like pulling in data through a spreadsheet. So those are all, just maybe some examples, and I'd like to go and show, a few of those. So it could very well be that we focus on like the localized flooding, say in the Nashville region, or like road management, whether it's closing off a road or worrying about like scour under a bridge. And there's partners we have so far who are really interested in those, as well as like just making sure that they have, paddleable conditions. And I figure, those are all really enjoyable. If anything, like I love to be out on the water too. So that's one that's kind of like near and dear to me. But, for some of the other like communities that we work with, like some of them, it's just a matter of being able to report after a storm what the water levels were like and if they were meeting the regulations. So it was just a matter of pulling in a spreadsheet and being able to access that information and put that into a report much quicker and much easier. And then another group that we're working with was their focus was asset performance. You wouldn't believe that there's actually like a Whole Foods parking lot on the other side of those trees, but this is actually a pretty urban environment, and it's an interesting one because they wanted to monitor this site to ensure that that there was water actually going into the basin and that it was infiltrating. And it turned out that after we installed the monitor there, that there was, even during heavy rain events, the rain was getting diverted. So that helped them to see, oh, this is something where we got to redo the channel, and now they're getting the benefits of, the actual designs that they had intended for. And another final example is managing reservoirs and lake levels. And so there's groups of partners that we've worked with where they have like on the order of like 50 different levels that they have to worry about managing, and they're limited crew to do so. And by tracking the levels at each one of those. That helps them wake up in the morning, pull it up on their phone and see, oh, these are the places that we need to go to today, and schedule things accordingly and just get on with their day. So with that, I hope that provides some sort of insights about like Hi-Fi and what we do. And overall, like we're just looking for like partners who are interested. And if you or anyone else you know may be interested, this is my personal email right in front of you, brandon@hifi.io, and I'd love to hear from you. And thanks again.
Hey, Brandon, really appreciate that. Brandon, really appreciate that. One question, I'm not an expert at these kinds of sensors, so maybe you can, if my questions are dumb, please excuse them, but what kind of technology? Because I'm beginning to understand that some sensors use different types of sensing technology.
Totally. Yes. So we are, in terms of like the actual sensor itself, that is what would be like an ultrasonic unit. So that is a contactless unit that allows us to put the sensor above the stream. As long as it has a line of sight to the water level, we're able to track how that water level rises and falls. And that also helps prevent us from worrying about like any debris, like tree trunks and things like that, running into our equipment, which we've had issues with in the past. So we decided to keep things low maintenance and portable, that a ultrasonic sensor would be the way to go. And it's connected to a cellular network. So that's how things are updated, is via cellular. And we work with multiple providers just to make sure there's redundancy that way.
Yeah, that's important. And for Ian and Karen who come after you, what kind of technology are you using? How is it connected? One of the things we'll talk about when Josh and Jeff come on in the second half is durability, because when they did the 3-year pilot, durability was an issue. Have you seen any issues around durability with your sensors?
Yeah, well, I would say like the durability has been pretty up to expectations. We've worked with these throughout the winter and throughout the summer, and in terms of just collecting the measurements, that's been consistently reporting. Battery life is, I don't know, as far as I can tell, indefinite, really. So even without sun, like these are designed to last for a long time in the field. So I'd be happy, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But.
Well, those are the kinds of questions that potential customers are always going to ask, and we'll review them in the use cases. So now we're going to, thanks a lot, Brandon, really appreciate it. And it's really exciting to see. I know you came out of the University of Michigan, correct? And
That's right.
Yeah, so it was really cool to see you as a startup. And we have a number of partners at the council who are always looking for technology solutions, especially new ones. So welcome on board to the commercial world, and we wish you the best of luck. So now, Karen, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you. Give Karen a moment. As everybody, for those of you that are on, this is very much a working session. This is intended to help Nashville solve these issues. Karen, if you're trying to talk, you're on mute.
Exactly. Can you hear me now? I don't see the presenter
but
tools.
I can't. I can hear you, but let's see. You should have gotten a dialog box that said you're now presenter.
Can you send it again, or maybe close it and open it again?
Sure.
Sorry. And I don't see that dialog box. I may have to present just verbally.
Okay, well, Jennifer, you'll see something that just says you're presenter. Don't worry about it, just you can ignore it. Okay, so now I'm going to make you the presenter again, Karen.
Thank you. Okay, I got something. Okay, I thought I had tested everything I would have to set, but I don't seem to be able to open up
So
that
I
presenter.
have, I mean, I have, I have your slide deck, so I will present it. We can get moving on this and
Sure.
not worry about that.
Let me just
Hopefully
email
I got
that
the
to you.
right one, Karen.
I
Well,
don't think
let's
so.
get started. Okay,
Oh,
let's get started because,
we will go ahead and get
well,
started. I apologize for this. I will send my slides afterward. So first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Karen Lindquist with Greenstream Technologies. Greenstream, we are really dedicated to real-time environmental monitoring. And today what I'd like to do is I'd like to share my approach to flood monitoring with you. And then I will talk about going from a smart city to a smart region by sharing stormwater data across borders and our experiences with that so far. And that slide presentation is not the one that I wanted, but it's okay. I'll go ahead and talk around it. Just to let you know, Greenstream is a family-run business. We're based in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and we believe in making it easy and affordable for budget-restricted communities to be proactive in responding to flooding. So like Brandon, we are excited and passionate about what we do. And yeah, absolutely. These are not the slides that I was going to present, but it's okay. We are passionate about what we're doing, and we also provide an end-to-end solution that includes sensors and communications and cloud services and data visualization. So, let's start with the edge sensors. And I think we might have a couple of pictures of those if you advance a little bit forward.
yeah, we can be agile here, so
There we
it's
go.
all about. Okay, there we go. Okay.
Okay, so we are using a modular approach, okay, and it starts with our low power, low footprint transceiver there, that square box that you see about the size of a sandwich Tupperware box. So this transceiver is interoperable with our non-contact water level sensor, with a tipping bucket rain gauge, or also with an optical rain gauge. And we are in the process of building interfaces for more sensors. So the nice thing about this modular approach is that we can use different sized solar panels to power our device depending on light availability in the area. And we can orient the solar panels south without disturbing the way the sensor is positioned or the way the electronics box is positioned. And the same thing, the electronics box is separate from the sensor, so you can plug different sensors into it, and you can adjust everything the way that you need it, according to what access you want and how you want to, keep it out of reach or orient it, right? Um, there are different ways to detect water level. Here's a couple of examples here. We are using this ultrasonic sensor for now, and I think it's similar to the one that Brandon uses in his device. This particular sensor provides the best price quality ratio for most of our purposes. So it's accurate to within 1 centimeter, and it has a range up to about 20 feet. So here you see a couple of examples where we're monitoring over dry land. There's a frequently flooded roadway on the left there. There's a downtown area in Portsmouth, Virginia that frequently floods, and you can't even see it. It's so small, but our sensor is attached to that lamppost there. If you go back, you can see where we're also monitoring over water. Okay, we can also use longer
That
range
was the
sensors.
previous one, right? So
Yeah,
now, yeah. So then you have the streets, and then here's another example. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, tidal waterways. That's a good one. Thank you. So we can also use longer range sensors. For example, if you want to put a sensor off of a very high bridge, but then of course, the price of the sensor and the power consumption goes up, but it's okay. It will also work. But this particular lowest cost solution is perfect for retaining ponds and reservoirs and lakes and creeks. I think the only place where we've really run into trouble is when we end up monitoring over very uneven ground, like if a stream dries out and there's a bunch of rocks in the bottom. All of our devices are really quick and easy to install, usually in under 20 minutes, never more than an hour. The maintenance is really low, especially with the non-contact ultrasonic sensors. And the perfect slide, the optical rain gauge you see here on the right, that's a very low maintenance. The main challenges we have to deal with in our deployments are what I call the 3 V's. So vegetation, varmints, so little animals and insects, and vandals, vegetation, varmints, and vandals. The most care-intensive sensor we're using right now is the tipping bucket rain gauge you see on the left. And that's because they have an internal moving part and it sometimes gets clogged if debris falls into the tipping bucket. So that's why we also have the optical rain gauge on the right. So we've installed in a variety of locations. We are primarily active in Virginia and the Carolinas, but we are monitoring in coastal and plains and mountainous areas.
Karen, if I remember correctly, you were part of the Cary project, right?
Yes.
Cary, North Carolina?
Yes.
Yeah, and I want to, just like Brandon talked about Cleveland and the Northeast Ohio Sewer District, I remember you talking about this, and we had Billy Lee and Terry Yates on last week talking about their overall program, and he mentioned your sensors was part of their project.
Absolutely, and those 2 rain gauges right there are Cary's rain gauges that you see up there.
Oh, good to know. Okay.
Yeah, so they are our first rain gauge deployment, not the first water level sensor deployment, but it's really exciting when we get a really heavy rain coming through the area to watch how, first the rain gauges pick it up. Well, it's coming anyway because of National Weather Service, but first the rain gauges pick it up, and then all of a sudden you see all the creeks that we're monitoring for them start to fill up, and you can just track the data. And then the rain tapers off, and then after a while the creeks go down.
Where do you want me to go next? So the next one was about the dashboard, yeah. But tell me if there's other slides you want, yeah.
Well, we'll just stop here for a second on the dashboard. I do want to talk about the fact that we have been working really hard on different types of mount solutions. And, when I share the slides in the end, I have pictures of each of them. So we are, attaching our sensors to existing infrastructure. We're also doing, mounting the sensors on poles in the middle of the water. That works fine if you have very calm water, like in a lake or like in a retaining pond, for example. And then, of course, in those cases where you have a creek where the water can get rushing really quickly, we found that the best place to mount the sensors there is off of a bridge. And we have a variety of solutions for different types of bridges as well. You asked about communication technology. So how do we get that data in real time to our dashboard that you see here? We have 2 different methods. One is the cellular, LTE Cat M1. That's typically the quickest and easiest in most cases. For the town of Cary, for example, for their project, they wanted to go with a special type of cell service called AT&T FirstNet. So we built that capability. And what FirstNet does is it provides especially robust communications during disasters, and they provide a dedicated bandwidth for first responders. So you avoid first responders not being able to see their data because the network is overloaded. Other communities that we work with want to utilize LoRaWAN as a communications protocol, and we do that as well. So the advantage of LoRaWAN, of course, is that it uses much less power than cellular, and a community can have control of its own network if it's willing to put in place the communication gateways that you need for LoRaWAN. A lot of cities already have LoRaWAN that they're experimenting with, so it's nice to have devices that can operate on it.
Yeah, when Terry was talking last week, he said for Cary they had to use a lot of cellular, just because otherwise it was connectivity was difficult. I remember him saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also for the town of Cary, because they didn't, put in any of the LoRaWAN gateways, but we have another example, Wilson, North Carolina. They have their own fiber optic networks. So it's very easy for them to put the gateways connected into their fiber optic. And then LoRaWAN is very long range technology. So they just put up 2 gateways and then, their whole city is covered and they can put the devices everywhere. I think it really, one of the things that we try to do is we try to work with what the city is trying to do. And that's why we have the 2 different communication protocols.
So what you're saying is that along with, what we're learning from Brandon and you is the availability of sensors, but it sounds like connectivity is a key issue on any of these sensors. So Nashville has to look at what kind of communication backbone it has.
Yes, connectivity is a key issue. There are some areas where, there just isn't cell service. And I don't know if legislation in the coming years is going to mandate that all those areas get cell service. But, in the meantime, what other what other technologies can we find? There's also satellite, but that gets very expensive. So,
Right.
so this is
Should
what
I
we are.
keep going through your slides? Yeah.
Well, just step back again there on the first dashboard that you were showing.
Sure. There we go.
Yeah. So we provide a simple dashboard so that you can view the data. So you see here, this is water level and also temperature. We have an onboard temperature sensor. And we also offer APIs so that you can pull the raw data into your own systems. We have a lot of towns that like to work with both. So for all of their technical people, they're pulling the data into their systems via our APIs and they're geeking out with it, but they use our simple dashboard to show it to their stakeholders who aren't so technically inclined. And then you can advance, Philip. Thank you for the next slide.
Oops, wrong way.
Yeah, there we go. Device health. We also show device health on the dashboard so you can see if there's a problem with the power, if somebody stole the solar panel, or if there's a problem with the signal to your device. And yeah, then next slide, please. Thank you. It's here is a link, recent rain events that we've captured. This is an overnight 9-foot rise in a tiny creek this summer in Wilson, North Carolina. And the next one, I hope I included it here. This is a 6-foot rise in a mountain stream during Tropical Storm Zeta a couple of months ago. And you can see that the flooding has come up over the parapet. There's our sensor there. This happened about a week after we put the sensor in, and the fire chief was absolutely delighted to finally have the data and to know that the flooding was happening on that bridge and that he could go out and close the road, instead of getting caught by surprise or having to babysit it. And then,
am I going in the right direction, Karen? Sorry, you're being very accommodating, so keep it up.
It's all right. So cloud services, we are offering real-time stream processing. We can vary the reporting frequency. I believe the standard that most of our customers want is every 6 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we also can vary the reporting rates according to different thresholds. So if it's a nice sunny day and you have a body of water that doesn't really change that much, maybe you want to slow down your reporting rate to conserve battery life or to reduce the amount of data that you're loading into your systems. Maybe you only want it to report once every few hours. But if we detect that the water is starting to rise, then we kick into alert mode so that we can report more frequently to you and you can see exactly what's happening, and then it slows back down again when the threshold goes back down to safe levels. Over the air.
I'm going to cruise through these next couple, and why don't you say a couple of words? We're starting to run short of time, but go ahead.
Okay. There we go. Quick and easy install, and we can continue. Here's the technical sheet for our water level sensor, the cell version, and you can move ahead.
And this is available to everybody as a download, just so you know. Yeah, same thing, Lauren. Yeah, okay, cool. This is
Yes.
the rain gauge you talked about. So this is good stuff. Okay, great. So this is good information for anybody that wants to download it. Okay, great. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, let's just last slide. Any last thoughts, Karen?
Last thoughts, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Please do contact me if you're interested, if you'd like to open a dialogue. We are happy to start small with you with a really tiny pilot project, learn with you and, build capabilities and build out your network. As funds become available, as politics allow, we are flexible working with you. Give me a call and introduce me to your neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks for being so adaptable. I apologize. It was probably my fault that you didn't get your slides up. So again, I think, but the handout that everybody has gives a lot of this technical information, and both Brandon and Karen can provide pricing information to anybody that may want to contact them. So with our next presentation is going to be from Ian Helmuth at IntelliSense. Ian, I have your deck, but why don't you go ahead and I'm going to make you the presenter and we'll see if we can get this to work.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone.
You should get a dialog box saying that you're the presenter.
And I have it. Can everyone see my screen okay?
We can see your screen. Thank you.
Great. So I'm Ian Helmuth. I work at IntelliSense Systems. I'm the lead designer on this project that I began back in 2016 with that was funded by DHS to develop these flood sensors. So over here on the left is a picture of our flood sensor installed at a stream out in, I believe this one is in Metro Summit Park, Ohio. So what we have here is a ruggedized IoT connected cellular connected flood sensor module. This is the Aware Flood system. Aware stands for Advanced Warning Equipment, which embodies the core design capability as an early warning system for natural disasters. So Aware, the advanced warning equipment, it's not just for flood. We're also working on programs for air quality as well as fire monitoring in the future. Who we are as a company. So we actually started off as a spinoff from our parent company, designing an all-in-one portable weather system for the Air Force. And that's that image there on the left. And then a lot of that same ruggedized design technology we use to develop the Aware Flood system there next to that. In addition to that, and as I mentioned, we're working on new products such as the air quality monitoring system, as well as our maritime weather systems. And we also provide data visualization and control software tools for those. Really what we stress is we try to make the system clean and simple to install and use. Excuse me. So this is the Aware Flood design phase timeline that we have. So we started out with a phase 1 prototype back in 2016, and really what I want to show here is that over the years we've used in this design iteration to really prove out the reliability and make any refinements through field testing that we've done through the years. So we in the phase 2 alpha sensor, we deployed over 100 of those in 2018, and then we deployed 100 beta sensors out in 2019. On the left here is a graph on the upper of one of our alpha prototype sensors, and this data tracks very well with the U.S. Geological scientific grade sensors that are also deployed. We deployed all of our sensors to over 7 state and local stakeholder communities. The beta sensors are still currently deployed and operational, and even many of our alpha prototypes are still operational after 2 years. This is a graph of our beta sensor compared to another USGS stage. And as you can see, that the data tracks very well with that installation. This is out in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, North Carolina. In addition to the field testing we've done, so we're in this phase 3 production stage with DHS right now, and we just finished building over 450 units that will be deployed to various municipalities and counties throughout the country. So we do MIL standard 810 testing on all of our sensors. We do this environmental testing because it's the most rigorous environmental standards that exist. So this really gives us the confidence that we know our sensors are going to survive and be durable and last. In addition to that, we also do ESD and FCC compliance testing to make sure that they are FCC compliant. So talk to you a little bit about the hardware. The Aware Flood, this is the baseline hardware configuration. What we have on the left here is the base module. Excuse me. We have all the solar cells. There's 4 of them integrated into the system, as well as the power, the barometric pressure. There's an integrated GPS in there, and then we also have the cellular, which we can run off of Verizon, AT&T, and international carriers as well. We have one up in Canada, and we're also working with Australia. We have a sort of a reinforced security lock loop on this as well, so you can actually put a padlock on this and a cable tie. So think of like sort of your bicycle lock. You could pin that down to an anchor if you wanted to prevent this from theft. We use a universal mounting plate. This is a stainless steel corrosion resistant mounting plate that can go on fence posts or horizontal railings or flat walls. It's similar to what Greenstream was saying. It's about 20 minutes per install. The water level sensor down there, we have a plus or minus half an inch accuracy or 0.5% over full scale. The cable length is 15 meters, and we can add extensions up to 90 meters. So these are some of the accessories and future enhancements I'll talk to you about. We have a camera. So this camera can be installed and pointed in any direction that you're interested in viewing. One thing to note about this camera is it allows you to capture images of events and actually utilizes our smart algorithms that detect events and send out images with that data to give you eyes on the ground, which we've found to be pretty invaluable for when you're limited on man resources and having to send people out. In addition to that, we just released the ability to add a tipping bucket. So this can also be adapted and plugged into your system. You have 4 sensor ports on this, so you can plug in, your camera, your tipping bucket, and your water level sensor all at the same time. We're in the process of developing the water level radar sensor. We chose this. It gives you a little bit higher accuracy than maybe your typical ultrasonic sensor. It would also, the radar is more immune to stuff like rain and temperature gradients that can happen throughout the season. So we're expecting to release this early next year. We also have SDI 12 expansion port, and we have a power module adapter for any power hungry SDI 12 sensors that you would plug into this. In addition to the communication, I just forgot to mention, I realized, so we have hardware built into it and we don't have it turned on, but 900 megahertz radios, it's the same communication that LoRaWAN uses. We have that hardware built into that, and we're also planning to release that sometime later next year. We have a Iridium satellite version, so for where cellular may not be available, we also have satellite communications. So from configurations, we spent a lot of time putting different configuration capabilities. A lot of this was lessons learned from field deployments, and shout out to Charlotte Mecklenburg for really helping us define a lot of different configurable options that make this sensor useful for their use case. So we put in alarm thresholds, so you can actually set, say at 5 feet, the water is going to start overtopping the bank. At 6 feet, it's approaching the road, and at 7 feet, you've overtopped the road. All three of those would send asynchronous data to your system, along with an image if you have a camera installed, in addition to the time series data that you would receive. So you have both the time series data and alarm thresholds being sent to your system. And then if you're using our software automatically sends out the SMS and email alerts to you. You can also change the reporting times and the sample modes. So our system is designed to, by default, run off of its own internal battery pack and its own charging system. It'll manage its battery for you. And in addition to that, you can say, okay, well, I don't need data maybe every 10 minutes. You can have it report once an hour for any of those low light conditions. We also have a saltwater adjustment. So, our sensor is pressure based. You talked about the different sensors. So the density of water is different in salt. So this accounts for that. So if you have a saltwater installation, you can use this as well. We can also, in addition to that, request images on demand, request GPS syncs for location changes, and also remotely reboot system if you needed to. We do produce system health checks information. So if a sensor becomes disconnected, you know about it and are alerted. Lastly, we can also set the user destination that you send this data to. So say you deploy 100 sensors in the field, and at some point there's an IT change, or for whatever reason you want to have these pointing to a new location, you can remotely configure that all from your office. So this is sort of the high-level network architecture we have here is our aware flood sensor on the left, and that again can send data via cellular to our server, or it could send directly to a software platform that maybe you already have existing. If you do go to our server, we use Amazon Web Services for reliability, for network uptime, as well as our own database and portal, and that really serves up our website capabilities. And from there, you can do your alert settings, your image schedules, export the data. We have up to a year's worth of data. We can actually do more than that, but that's what's offered as sort of a part of the base capability. And then also we have a command queue, so you can see which commands were sent to which units and eliminate duplication there. We also have email and the SMS alert service from our server based on those triggers that are sent in. Lastly, so how do you get the data to your third-party platform? A number of ways. You can do the direct ingest method that currently works with Contrail and DataWise software platforms. And we're in process of working actually with the Army Corps of Engineers for their new Midas software platform. We also have a two-way JSON API. We can publish MQTT data, or we can just straight up forward the data to your server. And then I just included this for when this deck is shared with you, but for pricing and interface control guide information, you can contact Ryan Guerrero. My contact information is on the very first slide, and there's some YouTube videos that you can watch for user guide and installation, as well as our user guide and installation documents. And that's it.
Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate it. It's great to see. I love the fact that you work with Charlotte, just like Greenstream worked with Cary and Hi-Fi worked with Cleveland. It's really important that you guys already have boots on the ground, so to speak, which I think is appropriate with your last picture. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back. I'm going to take the screen, and I'm going to ask Jeff Booth and Josh McSwain, Tom Palco, and Roger Lindsay to turn on their screens, because now we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the use cases, which of course all of our presenters have explored already. Hi, Josh. We got Roger. We got Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. and we're just waiting for Tom, but let's go ahead and get started. So what I'd like to do is I've, as I told you earlier, I have cataloged each of the use cases that Josh piloted in Mecklenburg. But really what I want is Jeff and Josh to sort of drive this, and for Roger and Tom to ask the questions that they need to get the information. And just so that everybody who's listening in knows, all of this information, the PowerPoint with the use cases, and the information from our presenters is available in the handouts. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to be here. So I work for the Science and Technology Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security. So we don't own a mission space, but we support the technologies that are used by our components. In this case, for the flood sensors, we started about 5 years ago with FEMA to identify some of their critical disasters, and flooding being the nation's most largest concentration of both death and loss of economic value. We focused on these flood sensors, and Ian is one of the companies that went through the process. 4 years ago, we started with 40 different performers, down selected to 3, did a prototype for 6 months, continued with the 3 performers for another 12 months, or excuse me, 24 months. And that's where we met Josh and a number of other players. So Josh was key into the evaluation of both the alpha and the beta sensors. We also deployed in Ellicott City, Maryland, the state of Kentucky with dams, the state of North Carolina, mostly sheet wash across roads and flash floods, Norfolk, Virginia for tidal surge, Torrance, California for urban flash flooding. And based upon that, we got over the 2 years of the deployed sensors, we ended up adding a lot of different functionality to the sensors. The key being it had to be stakeholder driven. So we just didn't want to, build something and they will come. We wanted the users to basically determine what the overall functionality would be to meet most of their needs. And Ian gave some of the examples of some of the functionality with his sensors. We're into phase 3 now. We've just finished producing 450 sensors. We're going to be deploying to all the Army Corps of Engineers districts in the United States. I just got off the phone this morning with NOAA. We'll be working with them to deploy sensors with them for evaluation, as well as the Geological Survey at their Hydrologic Infrastructure Center, as well as some of the regions, the state of California for a number of areas, both wildfire and regular flooding, Texas, Australia, California, the state of Virginia. So these sensors have been through a number of tests, but again, it's all user-based in terms of the value of these sensors. Again, S&T doesn't own the mission, we just support it. We wanted to put a low-cost sensor out there that was not really scientific grade like the U.S. Geological Survey or the NOAA sensors, but something that state and locals could use, more of a commercial grade that still provided the relative accuracies you would need to do a number of different use cases for your communities. So with that, I think the real value in this is the discussion. And I guess, Phil, I'll turn it back over to you and to Josh to talk about some of the actual applied cases.
Thank you. So Josh, we're just going to roll through some of these use cases that you provided. And for everyone, there is a field guide that Josh and Mecklenburg County put together that is one of the handouts. I mean, it's really, really good. I mean, really look at it. They took it to the nth degree in terms of providing functionality. So Josh, do you want to go through some of these use cases, and then I'll just flip through the screens as you direct me?
Yeah. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So yeah, we'll just we'll visit each one of these briefly. But before I do that, I want to give everyone background, of Charlotte and our flood warning system that we've had in place for about 20 years now. Prior to the DHS project, we had 71 operational stream gauges and 51 rain gauges already in place. Those are all USGS gauges, maintained installed and maintained by the USGS. So we've been a cooperating partner with them for 20+ years. So when the DHS project came out with these low-cost flood sensors, it got our attention immediately because we still had gaps, believe it or not, even though we had 120+ sensors out there, but we still had considerable gaps in our flood warning or flood monitoring. So we partnered up with DHS and began testing the 3 different vendors' sensors, and now we're nearly 3 years down the road, and we're to the point where we're putting them into operation for the benefit of Charlotte-Mecklenburg and the flood warning system. So what you see on the screen here are some use cases, examples of where we installed these sensors and why we installed them there. So the first one talks about the unmonitored flood risk. So that's an area where we knew there was the risk of flooding to structures, to roads being overtopped, greenway bridges, so on and so forth, but we had no way to monitor it remotely. So that was an example. There were a lot of those. We just couldn't cover them all, but we covered the ones that we ranked with the highest risk. So scroll on down, Philip. So stream crossings, so we have roads crossing streams. We have a large number of stream crossings. A little bit of background, Mecklenburg County. We have several thousand miles of streams that we monitor, and all the streams in Mecklenburg County, they begin in the county. So we have a lot of headwater here, so extremely flash flooding issues that we have to deal with. So we identified stream crossings that we need to install a low-cost sensor into to monitor for that risk. Go ahead. Critical infrastructure. So, we identified, for example, a couple of them are listed here, sanitary sewer lift stations, and critical facilities like daycares, hospitals, entrances, anything that dealt with would turn into a very critical situation in an emergency event. So we identified all those critical infrastructures and ranked them, and we installed flood sensors in the area of those critical structures. So go ahead. Water quality, restoration sites. So I'll mention that I'm a part of a team of about 10 staff that actually work on this DHS project. We're not full-time on the project, but we do blend in the DHS project with our regular daily activities. So our water quality group, who already had experience in the field installing and maintaining sensors for water quality, they were tasked with installing, maintaining, operating these low-cost flood sensors. So once the analysis was completed of where to put them and what use cases we needed them, then water quality staff went out and actually did the installations, and they continued to do the maintenance on a quarterly basis to maintain these sensors. So we're using this not only for flood warning, flood monitoring, but it's used for water quality purposes also. We have another one.
Josh, what do you mean by in the far right column? Because I noticed sometimes the cameras were a really good feature, and then other times they weren't as effective. But obviously, you have big issues with cameras in terms of, especially if you try to go to video, which isn't needed, but with connectivity. But what was the issue around construction activity?
Let's see. Camera resolution not sufficient to monitor construction activity.
And if you don't remember, you don't remember. So that's not a problem. Don't worry. This is a working session. We're not perfect here.
I will mention that the cameras, they're an add-on. They're not our primary need. During or for these sensors, they're nice to have a picture for. You don't have to explain a picture. Anybody that doesn't understand a hydrograph or what's going on by looking at a blue line on a hydrograph, they can look at a picture and see that the creek's up and out of the bank or whatever. And also that picture can validate what your sensor is reporting. So it's got some value. These aren't video type cameras. They take an image and, again, they're an add-on. And any user can feel like if they want to upgrade them, then that's up to them. So.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you. Next one.
So here is this is a big one. So flood mitigation sites. So Charlotte-Mecklenburg has had a mitigation program going for, I guess, probably over 20 years now, and been very successful in working with FEMA and local dollars. We do have a stormwater fee in place, so we have budget to work with, and along with FEMA to go in and buy out properties that rank high on the benefit cost analysis. So we've bought out hundreds of homes, we've elevated hundreds of homes, and so we monitor these flood mitigation sites for two main purposes. Again, for flood warnings, there's still threats in these areas. We didn't buy out everything. And the other purpose is for calculating what we call losses avoided. So after you have a storm event, a flood event, then we want to be able to report the losses that were avoided due to all the mitigation efforts that have been going on for 20 years. So we just had a storm November the 12th, just a few weeks ago. One of our biggest floods we've had since we've had a flood warning program, very widespread. And the calculation was a little over $9 million that was avoided. The losses were avoided with all the mitigation efforts. So having these low-cost sensors, it's been huge to allow us to come up with that kind of number, because it'd be so expensive to put in, a scientific level gauge, a USGS type gauge at all these monitoring sites. So it was so much more cost effective to put in a low-cost sensor in these mitigation site areas. Go ahead. Rapid deployment quickly. So we have the ability, again, this is not a feature that you could have with the traditional scientific level gauge. Now I know the USGS and other sensor companies have, or agencies have, rapid deployment type sensors, but these low-cost flood sensors gave us the ability to go out ahead of a storm, ahead of a hurricane, or ahead of a cold front moving across, or a warm front moving across the mountains into North Carolina. Gave us the ability to go out prior to the storm, install a sensor in an area, have it record the storm, and then retrieve it, or make it a permanent site, depending on how well it performed and if we need it any longer in that area. So go ahead. Operational hotspots. This is our stormwater operations group. They have a list of what they call hotspots of areas, stream crossings that routinely get blockages, so debris that blocks up a storm drain. So we installed sensors in some of those areas to help the operations group identify blockages versus them having to put staff out there continuously driving by just to take a look at it. So go to the next one. Illicit discharge. So back to the water quality. This is the last use case that we utilized. So with the illicit discharge, so 3 vendors, I think all 3 of them maybe mentioned different frequencies of reporting. The sensors reporting, at 10 minutes, 15, once every 12 hours, whatever the need is for the customer, and balancing battery life and data stores and all that kind of stuff. So ours, we chose to go with a 10 or 15 minute interval, and the reason was because, again, we use these for water quality, not only flood warning. So if we have an illicit discharge, we have a sewer overflow, for example, on a bright sunny day when you wouldn't expect flooding to occur, we could potentially identify that illicit discharge for water quality purposes. I think that's it, Philip.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thanks a lot for reviewing those. So let's just, we have limited time, but I would love to hear from Tom and Roger any insights that you guys may have about what we're seeing here and what we've heard from both the vendors, Jeff Booth from DHS and Josh McSwain.
I can lead. This is Roger Lindsay. I function as the practice leader for the stormwater and floodplain management with Metro Nashville Water Services. So I was part of the recovery from the horrendous 2010 flood that we had, and the months and months and then years of post-flood work, working with a great team of both city departments, our ITS department, planning department, our department, and also with our federal partners to develop a flood forecasting tool, the Nashville Safe tool, which has been described in some of the earlier presentations that we've done here with Smart Cities Council. But that tool relies on a system of USGS gauges, which we know to be expensive gauges to operate. We doubled the number of gauges in our city from about a dozen to about 25 in the first year or two after our flood, because we wanted gauges in our critical facilities, and we wanted to expand our network of gauges around our major distribution, our major water quality basins. And so that's been a lot of the basis by which we have for 10 years now responded during emergency activations. We watch our gauges, and Jennifer Higgs in our ITS department was the architect of our Nashville Safe program, and so this program automatically gathers that data from USGS gauges and from about 20 Metro operated rain gauges. And we have talked for a number of the last several years about the need to install additional gauges, and we had all long since developed a list. Even before our involvement in this program, we knew largely where we wanted to install a number of these additional gauges. And then I had the opportunity to see presentations about a year and a half ago with the National Hydrologic Warning Council. Both Jeff and Josh were involved in presentations there to talk about Charlotte and what Charlotte was doing and the sheer number of gauges. So we have just really been intrigued. We like a lot of those use cases that Josh described. Certainly the ability to install a few redundant gauges just to cross-check our USGS gauges, but we already had a list of almost a dozen kind of mid-sized drainage basins that have exhibited previous flood response during intensive rain events, where we knew we could install new low-cost sensors like these to provide the additional level of detail that was important to our reaction process during an emergency activation. And then obviously some of the others, the critical facilities. We do have USGS gauges at all of our major water and wastewater treatment plants, but the ability to put them at some of the lift stations and water pump stations, the ability to track for some sewer overflows, those water quality related monitoring would be really important to us here. And Tom, you may want to talk some more about the mitigation projects, those buyout areas. I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, sure. Like again, this is Tom Palco, and I'm the Assistant Director of Metro Water. I'm over the Stormwater Division. And like Roger said, we have 533 square miles, and we have 26 major stormwater basins. So having 25 USGS, we've got so many blind spots. And we know that when we're sitting during an activation, it depends on whether the storm cuts across the south part of the county or goes across part of the north part of the county. We just don't know what's going on in some of those edges. And we have some steep terrain here as well and some very flashy streams. And by the time that we get a phone call, it's too late to go out there to be proactive and put up barricades or whatever. So we have folks that are experiencing dangerous situations and we're just totally blind to until after the fact. So I think with this discussion I've heard today, I think you've covered every avenue of where we were thinking we would need a sensor and actually opened our eyes to a lot of other places that we could use them. I really like what you're doing with the home buyouts. We've just bought our 400th house and taken it down, and we have looked at what some of our losses avoided are. And we have one area where we show that, there was every other year there was a storm event that led to someone filing a claim against flood insurance, but all the claims in that area, in that one particular area, they stopped in 2004 when we purchased the last of the houses in that area. So we don't know how bad it's flooding because our eyes are on something else during the next rain event, and there's nobody living there anymore. So, we don't track that. So the idea to be able to go track that and say, hey, based on the elevation certificate of the house we took down 10 years ago, this house again would have had 4 feet of water in it. So I think that is very exciting information to have. And we're again trying to get our fair share of FEMA mitigation money as well. And we've done a lot of local buyouts as well. We've done about 69 or so at 100% Metro cost. So one question I have though with this data, Roger was describing our flood warning system, and we get a lot of people, either private citizens or even industries that are along the river, saying, hey, I like your tool. Can I look at your tool during an event? And part of it is where some of the stuff takes analysis. Like you say, some of the stuff when you look at it, you don't really know what you're looking at, and there's some analysis maybe. But again, a camera is a camera, and people can see that. So my question is, how open is Charlotte to letting the community at large, private citizens, see the data that you're pulling in on your vast system of gauges? What can they see from the privacy of their own home?
So they can see every gauge, every camera. The only thing that the public cannot see, and this is a request from emergency management, is they cannot see the flood warnings that are generated. So that sometimes is hard for people to believe. Why is the warning not going directly to the citizen? Again, that's recommendation from emergency management, who we send all of our flood warnings to. They wanted to be the one to receive it and make the rash decision to respond or not, because hey, these sensors, USGS included, they send off crazy readings sometimes, and which would automatically generate a flood warning. So that rule you have written in the software doesn't realize if that data is, it just assumes it's right. So there are things in the software that you can identify spikes with, but yeah, the public can see everything. We are in the process of setting up a subscription for notifications, not flood warnings, notifications. With these flood sensors now, we have, in an area, a community maybe that has an overtop road that frequently overtops, and we have a low-cost sensor out there. The idea is to allow anyone in that area to subscribe and receive an email or a text at a certain level. If it's whatever, prior to overtopping the road's overtopped. It's not a flood warning, it's a notification, allowing you to act accordingly. So yeah, it's pretty open, other than the actual flood warnings that go to emergency management.
And you remember, Tom, that last week, Terry and Billy from Cary talked about this very issue. Remember that the first thing they did is, once they created the alert and notification systems, is they tested it out on city employees to make sure that everybody understood what was being shared, and then they sort of are starting to filter it out. It sounds like Josh and Mecklenburg are a little further along than Cary was, but there does seem to be sort of a teething process that you want to go through. Go ahead.
We had a period of intense worry, I guess, after our May 2010 flood. That was an epic, 1,000-year rainfall event that created at least a 500-year flood in almost every stream across the county. And shortly after, later in that same year, we had a very small rain event on one of the smaller streams, smaller rivers. And we knew that the flood was not to get anywhere near what we had, but people were calling us, wanting to know where they should be sandbagging. And we're like, there's no need to sandbag. This is not that event. So we're a little concerned about, again, overreacting. Overreacting is probably, equally as bad, or sometimes, as bad as not reacting at all. Where we're creating a panic in the neighborhood where there doesn't need to be. We also had people with our system in place now. we also have the ability. I had one call one night when we were there. Lady was trying to get home after a long day at work. She says, "Hey, I see the creek is rising. I see the river's rising. You know, is it going to get my house?" And she was at least 7 or 8 feet above what the absolute potential could have been for that storm. I told her to go home, go to bed, and rest assured. So it does give you that you know, that sense that even if we miss it, we weren't going to miss it by 7 feet in those predictions. So that was kind of a benefit to us to be able to tell people when they actually should be worried, and also, you know, this is not May 2010. Everybody wants to think that it's raining again. Here comes May 2010, but it's just not the case. So
what? Go ahead, Roger. And then I have a couple questions
I
about that I'll follow up with. But go ahead.
Okay, I want to point out another component of our program. We've worked with the Nashville District Corps of Engineers. They do all of our modeling for us. They're as quick as a quick phone call away. But one of the things they've really embarked on in the last 2 to 3 years is to expand our initial HEC-RAS modeling, the HEC-RAS modeling of our entire stream system, to include also now HEC-RTS. So it's real-time simulation. And so every one of our six largest major drainage basins now has a HEC-RTS model completed. And the benefit to us with real-time simulation is that we're able to monitor storm systems that are coming, that are on their way, and then to grid that rainfall across our basin and forecast ahead by several hours. And some of the readouts that come from the RTS models indicate where we're going to see peaks in some of our USGS gauges, and would work the same way in understanding where peaks may occur in some of these low-cost sensor type systems. And then we watch after the fact. We look at the output from the real-time simulation models versus the hydrographs that are shown in the both the USGS and the National Weather Service hydrographs for a rain event, and we see the water coming up and bumping flood stages and then coming back down. In some cases, double peaks in those hydrographs. It's amazing how accurately this RTS system is forecasting going ahead. I'm intrigued by the fact, and I just applaud all three of the technical vendors that have presented for us this morning, that these are not just simple gauges that track a water level elevation. They're being prepared in conjunction with cameras, with tipping rain gauges, and so we can see the installation of similar gauges around our county where we have no existing rain gauge information coming from. Not only could you greatly expand the number of stream monitors, river gauge and stream gauge monitors, but you could install these systems with tipping rain gauges around blank areas of the county as well, and greatly increase the coverage of our real-time simulation. I think that's a fascinating thing to look at in the years to come.
Thanks, Roger. And Josh, I've had a couple of questions from some of the other Nashville staff, so who aren't as probably a little bit more like me. They're not as experienced with the use of the USGS rain gauges and the sensors. So are these low-cost sensors, are they just augmenting what you get from the USGS, or are they actually adding value? And then if you've been able to measure that with sort of a financial return on investment. I mean, I know you talked about loss avoidance, and Tom mentioned that too.
So augmenting the cost. Well, I'll talk about.
So I guess another way of putting it would be: are the USGS gauges enough, or are the sensors really adding value? I mean, I get the sense they are, but I think some of the questions is the more complete coverage adding value?
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to the low-cost sensors being installed, we had roughly 30% of the areas at risk of flooding monitored. After we installed the flood sensors, we bumped that number up to 96%. So, that was dramatic increase in monitoring areas of risk.
And how many additional sensors was that, Josh? So, there was a couple, it was less than 100, I think, right? Or
Yeah, at one time we had up to 93 installed.
okay.
But again, you got
So
to
with
think about
93 additional sensors, you got about 96% coverage. Okay.
right. But at the time, we were still primarily doing this for the purpose of sensor development. You know, we had a contract with DHS. We still have a contract. So we were focusing on getting as many sensors out there in as many varieties of areas. That was the primary focus. That's why we were up to such a high number of sensors. We have since brought that number down to 76 sensors that we're currently operating. But let me real quickly add a second part of this DHS contract is developing what we're calling inundation mapping and risk assessment, risk reduction tools. So these flood sensors, so prior to the flood sensors being in place, we didn't have the level of detail of monitoring that we do have now. So if we did a real-time inundation mapping back then, so we would have to do a lot of guessing, a lot of interpolating between sensors. Now we fill in those gaps. Now we're getting accurate, reliable information from these low-cost sensors, and we're able to, like we did this past November the 12th, real time as the data was coming in, we were producing inundation maps. And the monetary benefit of that is we not only know what structures are being impacted real time, but we also know that there's value associated with that inundation. So there's still structures out there, there's roads that are being stopped, there's businesses that are having to close, but we can track that real time, and that comes in huge doing a post-event damage assessment. We know exactly where to go. In the past, if it flooded, we kind of guessed, yeah, this area is usually impacted, but now we know. So it cuts down on the time that staff has to be out in the field. We go directly where we need to be, and we're not out there just driving around looking for, rack lines and flooding.
And that should also help you with the permitting process to rebuild flooded properties, to make sure that you have a cumulative substantial damage improvement policy or whatever, that you're not allowing a structure that's been substantially damaged to be repaired back the way it was before the flood. So it seems like that would help that as well.
Yeah, we used to have to rely on the permitting process, to identify some of these flooded structures, but now we know which ones are flooded, and we can put hard holds on that structure and to do what you just said, determine if it's substantial damage or not. So yeah, you're right.
Great, because I think that's the money question. Go ahead, Jeff.
And in talking recently with NOAA this morning, Army Corps of Engineers, and the Geological Survey, they all recognize that low-cost sensors to help densify their network, while they're not going to meet the accuracy, and they do flow and a number of other things that we're not producing, but the densification of their network to help validate their models is going to be key. We're no longer in that federal phase of, yeah, let's just go out and throw up a new satellite, or let's put up a bunch of new sensors out there. Those days are gone. So the Fed is going to rely heavily on partnerships with state, local, and industry to help supplement this data. So one of the requirements that we're putting on these sensors with providing these sensors to our federal partners is, all right, how do we share this data at the state and local level, right? There's no sense putting, a local sensor, a state sensor, and a federal sensor in the same location on a stream, right? Let's work out ways in which we can share this data, but can these data be used by the feds to help densify their network, validate their models, and provide that information back to state and locals? Because let's face it, all disasters are local. So that's one of the goals we had with this effort, was for data sharing.
So I really like, you're going into a whole nother area, which I find fascinating, which is the idea of data sharing. And of course, Roger was talking about sharing data with the Army Corps of Engineers to get simulation. Just so we could end on this maybe, because our next week we're going to be talking about data. We're going to have a couple of solution providers talking about integration and analytics. Roger, I know you attend a lot of industry stuff, but Jeff, you may have some insights in here. How is data sharing occurring? Is it successful? Does it need more work?
Oh, it definitely needs more work. And let's face it, I mean, we even the Fed in the satellite, we base data off on, recoup of dollars. I mean, and every industry provider wants to resell their data more than once. So the question becomes, the value proposition, value is defined by the user. So if the Fed is going to provide, let's say FEMA mitigation, hazard mitigation grant dollars, and a local community wants to apply for mitigation grant dollars. And part of their application would be the statement that they would make those data available to a broader community. I would imagine the federal government be more inclined to look favorably on a grant like that, right? I mean, we've got to get to the data sharing piece of it because, data is very expensive, right? The sensors we can build and replace. And what we're trying to also get to is dual use. So fast forward 5-10 years. 5 years ago, we started looking at developing these low cost sensors. Now they're here, right? Next 5 years, we'll see refinement enhancements, and they'll be, I'm hoping, a very densified commercial market by then. Now look forward. In 10 years from now, I would imagine that these flood sensors are going to be at Walmart, Costco, whatever it might be, where you plug it in, it goes to your Google Nest, it goes to your ADT, and we've talked to the big insurance and home security offices. Hell, we've talked to the transportation industry. They would love to have, their OnStar say, hey, look, you're about to cross into an area of flooding. There's a flood a mile away. Turn around, don't drown. You keep driving. Half mile, it comes back and says, hey, there's a flooded, up here at this road crossing. Turn around, don't drown. You drive into that flood. You get out of the car. Your car is a total loss. You live. Should the insurance company pay for that car? So it's going to change dramatically in terms of 5G, the communicating on the edge. It'll help with the modeling that Roger talked about, where you have this one anomaly with a sensor. Well, what do the other 5 sensors up and downstream say about that? Is there a validation there? This is just going to accelerate. What we have now is, I mean, we're on the very beginning of what I see to be an industry growth curve, and data is a factor in that. But dual use, I mean, some of these sensors are going to be used for, just the opposite of flooding. In Texas, the Lower Colorado River Authority, who we've worked with, wants to put these sensors out with soil moisture indicators. They release 1 billion gallons of water a day for rice farming, but it's not to irrigate the rice, it's to drown weeds. 1 billion gallons a day. So if they don't have to release that water, think of the amount of money they're going to save. And these are just a variety of dual markets that we're starting to look at with these sensors. So, I mean, our approach has been, obviously flooding is the biggest disaster. How can we focus on that? But are there other markets, other commercial avenues where these vendors can be successful and therefore viable in the market? Prices come down through competition, data is shared, state, local, federal, and we start to really gain the benefit of this technology. So I'm very excited about the future, not just the flood sensors, but the industry in general for IoT sensors.
And I want to, Roger, Tom, Josh, any last thoughts? I do want to end on one thing about DHS, but go ahead. Yeah.
And just to follow up on your question about data sharing, and we're finding, Tom and I, we do a lot of presentations, and we thought 5 years ago that people were tired of hearing about what we were doing in Nashville. We continue to track Charlotte. We consider Charlotte to be our big brother. They're 10 years ahead of us in a lot of things that we would like that we aspire to do. But there's a lot of interest at the national level. That we're involved with the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I mentioned earlier the National Association, the Hydrologic Warning Council. They're doing good work and disseminating a lot of great information. We in Nashville, we provide supporting information for the city of Chattanooga and also for the city of Memphis. We've done presentations on our flood forecasting tool. So and then the Corps of Engineers, the Nashville district started this real-time simulation modeling for us, and they kind of spread that to the Galveston district down in Texas. And so we're seeing just in the last 3 and 4 and 5 years, a significant increase in the amount of really progressive implementation of the skills and the abilities that we have gained just in the last 3 to 5 years. So I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on, and a lot of cities are watching and seeing and aspiring to do the same. So I think it's going to be great for the industry.
Really appreciate that, Roger. So I am going to end on this one thing. I have been receiving an email from the DHS Science and Technology Directorate, and have been just really amazed at the level and the depth of the research. And if anybody goes to DHS Science and Technology Directorate, they should be able to find it, right, Jeff? And I apologize because I didn't. I should have had a slide on that, but I have found that information to be really useful. You're pushing out in a lot of different areas the work you're doing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we're our group alone. We're working with California on wildfire sensors now. We're working with in-building sensors for major sporting venues in terms of detection and tracking. We're working on the chemical biological. We're working with the COVID sensor produce. I mean, we're working in a lot of areas right now. And again,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
Partnering with state and locals to try to test this technology, or private sector in particular. Yeah, there's a lot of promise.
I'll send out. I'll get this website with where you can subscribe to your email and send it out to the list, because I have found that to be extremely useful. Well, everyone, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. We went over by half an hour, but frankly, I'm a bit of a data geek, so I really love the discussion. And I think this was really, hopefully Roger and Tom and the others can, your time and effort is really going to help Nashville in solving some of these issues, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next week, data integration, everybody. We'll go up the architecture. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Take care, man.
Thanks.